Gerald Armond Gallego and Charlene Adelle Gallego. Born Charlene Adelle Williams, October 10, 1956, are two American serial killers who terrorized Sacramento, California between 1978 and 1980. They killed a total of 10 victims, mostly teenagers, whom they kept as sex slaves before killing them. Charlene Adelle Gallego. Charlene Gallego, Charlene Adelle Williams, was born near Sacramento, California, in October 1956. Her father, Charles, was a respected entrepreneur who was the vice president of a supermarket chain. He and his wife, Mercedes, regularly traveled as part of their business life. Early school reports suggest Charlene was a quiet and shy child who had good attendance. Charlene's mother Mercedes was involved in a car accident, leaving her badly hurt and causing her not to travel as often. Due to the accident, Charlene took over her mother's duties and would often travel with her father to meet his clients, who would praise the intelligent and well-spoken child. By high school, Charlene had begun using drugs. She also drank heavily and bragged about having a black lover. Young Charlene was very promiscuous, but her parents were in denial. Charlene married a wealthy, introverted man who was dependent on heroin. She was using large amounts of cocaine and she didn't care about her appearance. Her first husband hated that Charlene's parents often intervened in their relationship. The marriage failed. She married another man, a soldier. She described him as a mommy's boy and grew bored with him, causing them to quickly divorce. Charlene had a brief affair with a married man. He ended the affair after she suggested that they should have sex with his wife. Charlene was devastated and attempted suicide. It was not long after this when Charlene met Gerald. After her release from prison, Charlene Gallego moved to Fair Oaks, California, and changed her name to Mary Martinez. She operated questionable charity companies following the death of her and Gallego's son in the war. She may also have lived in Roseville. Gerald Gallego. Gerald had a brutal childhood. He was beaten by his mother and her numerous boyfriends. He was constantly left starving and grew up desperate for love. His father was a convicted murderer who was executed for the murder of 2 policemen. He had failed as a lover and a husband, and, by the age of 32, he'd left numerous women. He also had a daughter, whom he abused sexually. When he met Charlene, they fell insanely in love and enjoyed rough sex, with Charlene being the submissive. Within a week of meeting, they rented a house together. Charlene accepted that he was interested only in his own sexual satisfaction. Gerald brought home a 16-year-old dancer. They had a threesome, but the women were not allowed to touch each other. The next day he returned home from work to find the women in bed having sex. Enraged, he threw the young dancer out the window and beat Charlene. He also withheld sex from her for a month. It seems he no longer found her attractive as she was no longer sexually dependent on him. Gerald sodomized his 14-year-old daughter and her friend, but it is unclear whether Charlene was in the same room or just in the apartment. With Gerald now unable to become sexually excited, one of the couple suggested kidnapping women to become sex slaves. Sources suggest that it was Charlene who broached the idea. Victims: Rhonda Scheffler and Kippy Vaught. On September 10, 1978, Rhonda Scheffler, age 17, and Kippy Vaught, age 16, were shopping at Country Club Plaza in Sacramento County when Charlene enticed them into their van. Gerald and Charlene raped and further sexually abused the 2 victims throughout the night in rural Placer County. Evidence showed that Charlene bit the breasts of one victim, and Gerald, the other. The next day, the Gallegos drove back to Sacramento County, where Gerald made Rhonda and Kippy get out of the van and walk across a field to a ditch. He hit the girls with a tire iron and shot them in the head with a .25 caliber pistol. As Gerald was walking back to the van, he saw one of the victims, later revealed to be Kippy Vaught, move. The bullet had only grazed her skull. He returned and shot her 3 more times in the head, killing her. Charlene would later tell a cellmate how ecstatic she felt during this kidnap rape. Brenda Judd and Sandra Colley. On June 24, 1979, Brenda Judd, age 14, and Sandra Colley, age 13, were lured into the Gallegos' van at the Washoe County, Nevada, fair with the promise of making some money delivering leaflets. Charlene drove northeast out of Reno on I-80 while in the back of the van. Gerald repeatedly raped the girls as Charlene watched in the rearview mirror. Charlene found a place to park in a desolate area known as Humboldt Sink. Gerald took a shovel and pulled Sandra Colley out of the vehicle, marching her toward a dry creek bed. He then stepped behind her and swung the shovel. Charlene would later recall the moment as the sound of a loud splat like a flat rock hitting mud, and the girl sank to her knees and slowly toppled over on her face. Gerald beat Brenda Judd to death and then dug a deep hole. He folded their naked bodies into it and placed a rock over the grave. The teenagers were listed as runaways for 4 years, until Charlene confessed to their murders during the 1982 trial. In November 1999, their remains were discovered by a tractor operator. Stacy Redican and Karen Chipman Twiggs. On April 24, 1980, the Gallegos kidnapped Stacy Redican and Karen Chipman Twiggs from Sunrise Mall in Citrus Heights, California. As with their other victims, Gerald and Charlene sexually abused and killed them. Other victims. Also Virginia Mockel. On July 17, 1980, 34-year-old Virginia Mockel was abducted from the parking lot of a West Sacramento tavern, where she worked as a barmaid. Her skeletal remains, still bound with nylon fishing line, were found outside of Clarksburg, California, on October 30th. In the absence of other evidence, loops of cord around the neck were seen as proof of death by strangulation. Craig Miller and Mary Elizabeth Sowers. In the early morning hours of November 2, 1980, Gerald saw a young couple, 22-year-old Craig Miller, and his fiancée, 21-year-old Mary Elizabeth Sowers, in the parking lot of Arden Fair Mall. In his most brazen attempt yet, Gerald got out of the car, walked right up to them, pulled out a .25 caliber Beretta, pointed it in the couple's faces, and ordered them into the car. Friends of the young couple saw them get into the vehicle and wrote down the license plate number. After driving to a secluded area, Gerald commanded Craig out of the car. As the young man turned to walk towards the front of the vehicle, Gerald aimed his pistol and shot Craig at point-blank range in the back of the head in view of Mary. Gerald then fired 2 more shots into Craig's head, as he lay lifeless on the ground. Gerald got back into the vehicle and ordered Charlene to drive to their apartment. Once back at the apartment, Gerald took his new sex slave into the bedroom and raped her for hours on end. Gerald then ordered Charlene to drive Mary and him to a rural area. Once there, Gerald ordered Mary out of the car. He then shot her 3 times at point-blank range. Trials. In 1984, Gerald Gallego was tried for murder in both California and Nevada. In both instances, Charlene testified against him. In exchange for her testimony, Charlene was not charged in California and she agreed to plead guilty to murder and receive a sentence of 16 years and 8 months in Nevada. Gerald was convicted in both states and was sentenced to death in both states. His death sentence in Nevada was overturned in 1999 and he won the right to a new sentencing hearing, but the new jury also sentenced him to death. Charlene Gallego was released from prison in Nevada in July 1997. Gerald Gallego died of rectal cancer on July 18, 2002 at the Nevada Prison System's Medical Center.